So finally, we have completed our technical session. So there is one interesting session in the last that we have, and we have a very interesting speaker with us. So moving on to the last session of the day. Uh, okay, yeah. So the last session is non-technical in nature. It's a different session. So we are going to be talking about gender and social inclusion in the EV industry. This is going to be taken by Mr. Rakesh Ganguly, who's a gender equality and social inclusion expert in our team. And unlike the other sessions, this will be more like a discussion. And I will introduce Rakesh to talk about it more. So Rakesh is a development professional with over 20 years of experience working with civil society organizations, governments, funded programs, CSR initiatives of multiple organizations in the domain of gender inclusion, social justice, and sustainable livelihoods. He has the ability to work independently with diverse teams and possesses a broad range of skill sets in functions like project management, program management, capacity building, documentation, research, communication, advocacy, innovation, and partnerships. So without much delay, I would like to invite Mr. Rakesh as our guest speaker for this special session today. And I would request all of you to participate in this session. This is going to be more like a dialogue that we are going to have with Mr. Rakesh. And Rakesh, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dhruv. I'm very happy to be part of this conversation. I will just put my camera on for a while so that we are able to see each other for a while, and then we'll move on to the presentation.
Yes, Rakesh.
Yeah. Is the camera on? Are you all able to see and hear me clearly?
Yes, yes, pretty clear.
Thank you. So, very happy to be part of this conversation, like I said. And in the next 30 minutes or so, what I'm going to try and do is to bring in some questions and some ideas and some perspectives around gender and social inclusion when we plan or think about public transport systems. And I'm sure that after a heavy session on mechanical engineering and all the you know nuts and bolts, this will be like a jump to get into social engineering of sorts. So let's try and see how much we can make out of this discussion. And like Dhruv mentioned right at the outset, that this is we are attempting to make this an interactive session. So how good this session would be and would turn out will depend a lot on how everybody kind of participates. And I hope and I welcome all of you to be as responsive, and please feel free to ask questions and share and add whatever you feel like. So without much ado, I would like to get on to the presentation. Let me see if please let me know if you can. I think Dhruv, you'll have to stop sharing so that I'm able to share. Is that okay?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So you can start your sharing. This will stop automatically.
Okay. Okay. Please do let me know if you're able to see the screen. I'm going to shut my camera off so that there is no bandwidth issue. Yeah.
It's visible.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So looking at gender and social inclusion in urban transport systems, and we are going to look at and explore maybe do we have any challenges, are there any opportunities for the EV industry? Okay. To begin with, so what we have broadly sort of divided the presentation into is we will look at some ideas and perspectives around gender, then we will move on to disability, then we'll sum up whatever we have discussed, and then we perhaps also, if time permits, we will look at some good case studies and some stories of change. So here is the first slide. I'm sure that a lot of people in this audience already know. I don't need to introduce, but this is the world-renowned physicist Stephen Hawking. And if you were to just suggest maybe the best public transport for Hawking in Kakinada, I put Kakinada because we are implementing the project in Kakinada city. But please feel free to take it to your own city. Take Hawking wherever you want. If you are in Delhi, please take hawking to Delhi. If you are in Baroda, please take him to Baroda. Wherever. Okay, but the challenge before us is to suggest the best public transport where hawking is able to negotiate, by himself. Okay, so it's over to you. Can I have some responses? Okay, what do you think would be the best, public transport, mode for hawking, and why do you think so? Any responses? You can get creative, get funny, whatever. Yeah.
See, yeah, you can share your responses via chat platform. You'll not be
Yeah.
able to unmute yourself, so we'll read out your responses.
Okay, sure. Please respond into the chat box.
So we don't have a response so far, Rakesh. So maybe people are struggling to
Okay.
find an
Are we
option for it.
dumbfounded by this question? Are we dumb? We can't imagine Hawking visiting our city. Of course, now he's up in heaven. But if he were to visit any of your cities, would there be any public transport that you would recommend? Okay, some kind of futuristic vehicle that goes 1,000 kilometers per hour. Fantastic. Somebody says Hawking. I don't get that. Okay, so that is time won't get wasted. Wonderful. Yes. So time is a factor. Yes. Any other responses? So for people perhaps who do not know about Hawking, he was, as I said, a world-renowned physicist and some kind of teleportation tech. Yes, and he was challenged physically, he had a disorder where he had lost voluntary control over his muscles, so he was not able to. No public transport available. AI-enabled automatic vehicle. Wonderful. So we know that, from the few responses that we have, the two things that I definitely see and it comes to me clearly, you might have other ideas, but one is that there is no existing public transport that can cater to Hawking's needs. That is one, because that is yet to come. So something which is futuristic. And the other reality is that there is no public transport available for Hawking, perhaps, sadly. So we know that if this is the reality for Hawking, who's a world-renowned physicist, and just look around, and if you were to just imagine how people who are disabled or who are as we call them people with disabilities, how do they negotiate their everyday transactions in a city? Are they able to get from one place to the other using public transport? Do we have, in other words, do we have a public transport system that caters to perhaps people with disabilities? We do see some people, we see very rarely some blind people who are blind who are able to negotiate in some limited manner, but largely we see that people with disabilities find it very difficult to get from one place to the other or to negotiate the day-to-day work. Okay, so that remains a huge challenge. Okay, and unless we actually start looking at things, apply that lens of inclusivity to see who are actually people who are using public transport, that is one. And we tend to focus on people who generally we tend to focus on people who are using public transport, and we don't really spare a thought for people who are not. Okay, and perhaps Hawking is one of the kind of persons or representing that population which is not generally seen in our public transport system. Okay, here is the second slide.
We're still on the first slide. No, we're still on the first slide.
Okay. There seems to be some glitch, Dhruv. I don't know.
Maybe you can pause the sharing and try to
Yeah, I'll
reshare.
just stop share and come back again. But that shouldn't have happened. Let's see. Okay, is it visible? Is my screen visible now?
Yes, yes, it is visible.
Okay, okay, okay. This is a second, image, where we see perhaps a fisherwoman who's taking her catch of the day, maybe to a local market. Okay, and we have just hypothetically called her. We have imagined her name as Shanti. So people who are familiar with this kind of a trade, or people who know fisherwomen, okay, I'm sure that people in Kakinada definitely do. So what do you think would be Shanti's experience of public transport? Have we traveled with fisherwomen in public transport? And do we have any sense of what would be their experience? And if we don't, can we imagine what it must be for Shanti on an everyday basis to negotiate and use public transport? Any response at all?
There is one response which says it is inconvenient.
It is inconvenient. What would be the inconvenience? Who's it? And there's a reason why we have framed this question in a certain manner. Who would it be inconvenient for, in the real sense? Yeah, there is luggage. Yes. Anything else? I can see there are 30 plus participants. Are we so exhausted? Is this question very, very difficult? I'm not referring to any of Hawking's theories. Yeah, troublesome to others. Yes. Yes, it can be troublesome to others. Any other responses? One is definitely inconvenience. The second is to carry, this luggage in a public transport. And third is that it can cause inconvenience to other passengers. Any other responses? Can you imagine? Actually, we could have framed the question in another way and said that, how would be your experience? Yes, veg eating people will get trouble, They will also vomit, there'll be a stench. Yes, the fisherwomen may not have money. There is a lot of smell. Yeah, it might stink. Even after the fisherwoman perhaps has got off the bus, there might still be a stink that is left behind. Yes. Yeah. So these are some of the lived realities. Although the name of the person is imaginary, but these are some of our lived realities. We see that public transport is accessed by a whole range of people. And they come from different backgrounds and they use public transport, of course, for moving from one place to the other. Their needs and the way they access public transport will be very, very varied. Okay, and perhaps what we see is that public transport is not as ready to cater to all the different needs that these diverse people might have. Okay, so let's put this into some kind of. There's some challenge. I don't know why, but I'm not able to move my slides further. I don't know if there is anything with.
Maybe you're sharing just one the current screen, so you can share your entire screen, and whatever you will be sharing, it will be visible.
Okay, I can do that. Share screen.
I think in the left side below you will be seeing that arrow.
On the left hand side below, is it? I don't see an
Yeah.
arrow on the left hand side. Yeah, I can see. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes. So maybe the questions that, there are some questions that we could actually think of. We are just framing these questions that we don't want answers to, every question. But perhaps these are questions that do come to mind. That why do we see less women traveling in buses? Okay, how many women auto rickshaw drivers and bus drivers? Let's ponder a little bit on the second question. How many women auto rickshaw and bus drivers, one might have seen in your own city?
We don't see your screen right now. If you have shared something.
Sorry.
We are not able to see
Okay,
your screen
okay.
right now. Maybe you can share it again.
Okay, okay.
And then use the arrow
Just
to
give me a
navigate.
second. Yes. I don't know why this is happening. Do you see it now?
We do it. We do see. Is there a navigation
Is it
arrow on the
visible
left
now?
side? Yes, it is visible.
Yes, I can see that. Yes, yes. Is it visible?
Yes, Rakesh, please go ahead.
Okay, okay. So now some of these questions definitely need some pondering. And the first question that I would pose for just a few responses is that how many women auto rickshaw or bus drivers have we seen in our cities? Is it a sight that we see very, very frequently that there are as many women drivers on buses and autos? Maybe the question is very simple. 1 among 1,000, okay? One response is 1 is to 1,000 is the ratio. Okay, any other responses? Or even higher, okay? Okay. Any other responses? But in other cities, there are all women bus drivers, so this question might not be relevant at all. Have you seen any transgenders, as drivers or using public transport, or we travel with transgender persons on buses? No responses at all. Everybody is so exhausted. Very few. Okay. Is there a reason to that? Is this by design that we don't expect transgenders to travel in buses? We don't expect people with disabilities to be on buses, or expect women to actually drive buses or autos, or is it something that is by there is another reason why we don't see them? No responses at all. Okay, so maybe I can just run through the presentation if we feel that it is not helping to be interactive. So we know that there are questions around gender and social inclusion in public transport systems. Okay, and these challenges are not easy to address, but we cannot not address them. Okay, they are very, very important because these are populations who are integral to the workforce. Okay, they are integral to our society, and not catering to an audience or a whole set of commuters for whatever reasons, whether they are cultural or there is a disability issue, etc., is something which is unfair. It is not. It is in a way a violation of their rights, where they are not able to access a public service. So how do we actually become more inclusive? How do we make public transport systems more inclusive? And these are the questions that we need to ask of ourselves, especially as maybe entrepreneurs, EV entrepreneurs, that these are some of the challenges that lie before us, and we need to address them as, and can we become perhaps agents of change? Okay, so there are different stakeholders, of course, involved in this entire public transport system. It is definitely not only the manufacturers or the entrepreneurs. There are a whole set of stakeholders who are responsible to make this public transport, to design and to also operate the public transport system. And but what we need to understand is to understand it in a holistic manner, in a more inclusive manner. And thereby we are asking these questions. So to put a little bit of a perspective on where it stands, so what we see is that uh, increasingly people are moving from rural. So there was a time when we said that India lives in its villages. Now we see that that there is a huge shift, and that reality is changing very rapidly. And there's a report that says that by 2030, 40% of the total population would be around in the urban areas, okay, or peri-urban areas. And there's a high-powered executive committee under the urban ministry which says that there's the investment required for India's urban transport infrastructure to develop that over the next 15 years is close to 23 lakh crores. And there's a green urban mobility scheme which has been launched, and they say that they are going to invest around 70,000 crores over 2018 and 23 for sustainable transport. Okay, and we see that there is a lot of momentum around the government addressing some of these issues of women's safety, public transport, and similar issues. But what we see also is that they are absolutely gender blind. There isn't much of a thought of how women are going to access and what are the challenges and how are we supposed to address those challenges and what are the gender inequities that are confronting us. So unless we are able to access and address, understand, and then address these challenges, the integration of women and girls' safety and their comfort and their convenience into urban transport systems will always elude us. It will always remain unaddressed. Okay, and we know that why it is important to address is that because they are part of the workforce and they are the only by urban transport is a means for women to participate, and access economic opportunities. Okay, and then thereby contribute to the economy, and thereby, transport systems play a very, very critical role for women's participation or workforce participation. Yeah. So what is missing is we see that it might not be, I mean, gender and social inclusion might not be a core competence among urban local institutions managers who remain primarily concerned with, it's like a service delivery mechanism which is completely gender blind, and not much of thought is given into how we are going to make that possible and how are we going to make that more inclusive. The other thing is that normally what happens is when it comes as a when we look at any public service and we are talking about gender, we only feel that gender is the responsibility of the women and child development department. All other departments can work in isolation, and anything to do with women is supposed to be the responsibility of the WCD, and that's where policy does not necessarily address women's issues. It's only after the SDGs, as we know, that we have both a standalone goal and also a goal that cuts across all the other 17 goals, where gender is looked at as a cross-cutting area. But otherwise, largely when we look at policy, it has always remained the domain of women and child development department, and that's the reason why other departments have turned a blind eye. We also know that 50% of our population, even in the urban population, is girls and women, but we see that, and their reliance on public transport is also very high, which is 84%, and they use, but the kind of public transport that they use is non-motorized, intermediate, and also not really the motorized transport. So there are some challenges and gaps whereby they're not able to use motorized transport, and we need to address them. And some of the statistics is of course there on display, that we know that women are involved in 75% of unpaid care work. What is unpaid care work? Taking care of the family, rearing child, cooking in the house, child rearing, etc., is something which is unpaid care work, which is done by the disproportionate burden of unpaid care work is always has been on women historically, and it continues so even in the urban areas. Then you also know that 66% of the urban transport users are women. Okay, we also know that women, some studies suggest that women are likely to trip chain, which means they use multiple modes of transport. Okay, and there could be again several reasons why they do that. As we saw in the earlier slide, that women more often travel with luggage, and also it's not people, it's actually with other, they travel with children, because children always have been the responsibility of women, as we can also see in the image here. And they also are constrained by time, what is called as time poverty. They have to do several things in a day. So if you look at the burden of work, women are more burdened because they are also what we call as the triple burden, and that's why they have very little time, and so they are also burdened with time. And perhaps private vehicles is not necessarily the first option for women, so there is a high reliance on public transport. So one, we looked at women as commuters or end users. We also look at perhaps women in the automobile value chain. And if you look at automobile industry, we know even when we are maybe when we are pursuing our education, we know that there is a unwritten kind of a gender stereotyping of who will choose what stream of education. So we know that certain streams even within the engineering field are kind of by default reserved for women, and there are others which are preferred by men. So automobile engineering and automobile sector has been heavily biased towards men, and we don't see too many women actually in the sector. So there was a study conducted by Deloitte and Automotive News, and some of their findings are very telling on this. Okay, we know that the work, and so they surveyed around 200 women online, and some of these responses are very telling. The first response is that it was unappealing. The work environment was unappealing, and it was 65%, as high as that. The second, we saw that there's a perceived lack of work-life balance because it is, high pressure job, so there wasn't much of opportunity for women, to balance both work and life. There was a lack of flexibility in work schedules. Okay, and there was a lack of advancement of opportunities. So, when it came to career advancement or promotions, there weren't those many opportunities for women per se. Okay. So how does one empower? What are the possible ways in which one could empower women in the automobile industry? So there needs to be a cultural shift, of course. Okay, and where does it come? How do we actually operationalize this shift? So one is to start at the top to make bring women more into the top management. Okay, and they should be in positions of power where they're able to take decisions on diversity and inclusion in the industry, in the companies. Okay, and to look at what kind of business opportunities are to be leveraged. Okay, also diversify perhaps the board composition, which is something which is gaining a lot of voice in these times, and more companies are looking for diversity in their board. Also, there is a lot of mentoring and sponsoring for women personnel in the industry. Both formal and informal mentorships are required because we do not have a long history of women in those positions. This is an emerging sector, and therefore there is a need for mentoring. Also, integrated infrastructure. So, how do you have the workplace? How do you design the workplace which makes it safer for women to? So, what kind of enabling environment or working environment is created for women in this sector is also as critical. Also, maybe hiring fresh talent. Okay, starting early, as they say, getting more fresh graduates, so that they're able to bring that kind of energy and new ways of thinking of women working in this industry. So, as an example, one could see that there are several examples. This is just one of them. In Delhi, where this Blue Smart has started, women-only taxis. Okay, and they have started a taxi service from Delhi airport to maybe some of these hubs. And one of the reasons why it has been popular is because it is safe, for women drivers to park their vehicles and to fly from airport to other places because it has very good security. Okay, but one of the things that you see is that these are operations that only happen during the day, because anybody who's familiar with Delhi will know that it is not still safe. So there are several other constraints that impinge upon women's choices of public transport, either as users or also as service providers, right? So you will see that this service is provided only during the daytime. They do not have night options. We know that there is another fleet in Mumbai which is called Empower, and they have women drivers, and luckily enough they fly specifically also in the night. So there are a lot of women who travel at odd hours, at whatever hours. They cannot be called odd hours, they're whatever hours, and then they might need transportation in the city, and this is a fleet which caters to them, and there are women only sort of cabs. So there are different kinds of services and emerging in different metro cities where women are seen as providing these kind of services. Okay, same is with disability. So how do we actually, the question is, how do we build a more inclusive public transport system for persons with disabilities? If you look at the macro scenario, we see that PWD representation is under 1%, of total employees. So people in the workforce, if you see in the formal sector, the representation is below 1%. Okay, and if you see the trends from 17 to 19 from the data that we have, okay, there isn't much of a shift. So in this kind of a scenario, we know that it is both the cause and effect. It is a very complex kind of a scenario, because if you see that the lack of public transport is a cause why we don't see too many people with disabilities in the workforce, and it can also be an effect. So it has a dual kind of a challenge. So because we don't see them, as I said right at the outset, because we don't see these people, in our everyday experience of using public transport, so they become invisibilized, by default, that we are not then considering. So our focus automatically is on people who are actually using. All the user surveys are only for people who are actually using. We don't necessarily reach out to people who are potential users and who are unable to use because of certain challenges in design or maybe other constraints. Okay, so disability is one of those challenges where we are not able to bring this population into the fold, and we are not able to cater to the disabled population through our public transport system. This is an example from a study conducted in the United Kingdom, where they say that it's very clearly visible that especially in the EV mobility sector, we know that charging is an issue, and one is the design of the vehicle, and second is of course the charging points and whether they are available publicly, whether they are at convenient locations. Okay, is it convenient for people with disability to independently charge their vehicles when required? Okay, so there are several challenges in design and implementation of e-mobility in several cities, and this is one of these examples. So you see that the person says that I have been disappointed though with the lack of public charge points near where I live, and when I do get one, they are often placed far from the other amenities and services which I need to also use. So it is not just about charging. So when you go to a petrol pump, thankfully nowadays you see that a lot of petrol pumps might have a washroom. Okay, you also have a space to fill air. So some of these associated or integrated allied kind of services are required to be accessed, and for specifically people with disabilities, maybe if you are not able to think in that manner, it might be difficult for them to then use. So we might have a charging station, okay, but it may not be convenient from the point of view of a disabled person. So how are we able to first understand what is the challenge, and secondly what kind of design changes are required, and are we able to make them, and how then we offer these services to people with disabilities is what we need to look at. Okay, so one of the examples that we see is that Mahindra Electric has created these vehicles where they have seats which are able to maneuver, and they are customized vehicles where they're able to, people with disabilities are able to carry their walkers and their crutch, etc. And it has a swivel kind of a chair which if you've seen, I'm sure that a lot of you have already seen this kind of a model. It was there across the news. So these are some of the design changes that are required to be made so that people are able to access public transport. So summing up, what we see is that just a few takeaways that we need to make a mindset shift, perhaps. So we know that unless we really give a thought, transport seems to be operating in a space which is very, very gendered, which means that it is biased towards a certain gender. It is designed, public transport systems are designed for people who are able-bodied, what we call it ableism and ableist, and they are also very, very exclusive for certain class and certain kind of people, certain categories of people. And we just saw maybe two examples right at the beginning. Okay, it is often seen as gender neutral. So a lot of people say that this is a transport, it's a bus. What we are creating is a bus, and there are seats available, and we are it is easy to get in, easy to get out, and there's a whole timetable. Everything is given. So we don't really bother about whether it is used by a man or a woman or a person with disability. We are here to create a bus. Okay, so we know that this bus is ultimately going to be used by somebody, and there are going to be several barriers before people and are getting into the bus, and how they are going to use it or whether they are going to use it at all. So it is not gender neutral. Okay, so people with different gender identities, whether it is transgender persons, whether they are women, men, schoolgirls, boys, etc., they have different gender rights. So people have different gender identities. They have different socioeconomic status, and they have different physical abilities, and that's why there are different preconditions and needs and restrictions for how they use public transport. I can tell you a very an example that comes to my mind when I used to travel in Gujarat, in the interior parts of Gujarat, with the tribal belt of Gujarat. I've seen that in a public transport bus, coming from a particularly tribal district, if they were if you were traveling from say Dahod to Baroda, and we saw that if the bus started off from Dahod bus station, which is highly it's a tribal dominated district, and there were a lot of tribal people who were going to some markets or hospitals, and suddenly if at a certain stop there were some people who belong to a certain higher caste, or maybe who are people economically well-to-do people, then the tribal people would automatically get off from their seats and they would sit on the floor. And these people who were otherwise, who have just boarded the bus, they would occupy the seat. And this was something which is an acceptable, kind of practice. Nobody would question it, neither the conductor nor the driver. It did not put anybody in any kind of discomfort. That was the kind of, as I said, that was a cultural norm. So I say that, we have to also look at how these services are transformed and how these social inequities are first, identified. For a lot of people that was normal, okay, but to me it wasn't, okay. And I'm sure to a lot of people in the audience it might not be, and to some it might be so far, but we need to question these things, okay. So it is not just about the bus, okay, or the bus stop, but it is also about what kind of practices or cultural norms operate, okay? And all transport are and as I said, are designed for able-bodied persons. So there is very little thought given to people with disability and how they are going to access this public transport system. And there is very little understanding of the needs and prioritization of marginalized and vulnerable populations, and we don't take their needs and consideration, in consideration, and that's why they sort of remain exclusive, okay. And especially in urban transport, there is a class bias. We see that who are these public transport, designed for? It is for a certain. You now see that a lot of metro cities also have certain AC buses. There are different kinds of features. But then you see that the more technologically advanced, public transport we have, more and more, we see that they are exclusive because of cost, because of technology, because of kind of, higher, high-end services that they provide. Yeah? And therefore, we need to look at public transport as a public service, and it should take precedence over financial success or profitability. And in an ideal scenario, and there has to be a fair balance between public and profit. So we know that there are a lot of there is a growing tendency and a shift towards privatization of a lot of public services, and it's the same for public transport. So while we do this, it is good. It's perhaps a good marker of progress, and a lot of private players are participating with a lot of good social intentions. But there has to be a balance between how you look at public welfare and how do you look at profits. One cannot be at the cost of the other. Okay? So that's what we definitely need to look at. Okay? And what we see is that there is, even when we look at what we mean by gender, so we feel that gender is only about women. So we completely obviate and don't look at transgender persons. Okay. And when we talk about disability, we say that, okay, we have a ramp in the bus depot, we have a ramp. So there's a lot of tokenism, one, and there is also a gap in understanding, or also maybe to some extent a serious engagement with some of these issues, because we only feel that our obsession or our ultimate goal is to give best technology possible, irrespective of who the end user is. Okay. Then we also have lack of accountability, in implementation. So we do not have, for example, we do not see any challenge, any penalty for not having a signage which is disability friendly. We don't have any bus stops which have any braille, notices or instructions or timetables, etc. So, and there is no penalty. So because there is no penalty, there is no accountability. Okay. And despite the fact that we know that social norms definitely predicate rights of citizens, so we may have a lot of citizenship rights, but we know that in practice, in our lived experience, our social norms take over and they take precedence over, our rights as citizens, and which is visible when we look at transgenders, we look at poor or the working class. There are caste barriers, so these become invisible to us. And there is also on the other side, there is a lack of awareness or lower awareness of these kind of rights and services among the user groups which belong to these low income categories. So how do we also make their voices heard? How do we integrate some of their needs and considerations is something that is a challenge that needs to be addressed by and the EV mobility sector definitely offers a it's an opportunity where we are able to build better. We have conventional transport systems have had maybe these challenges perpetuated over the years, but in the EV mobility sector, can we improvise and improve on some of these sectors? We know that some of this is already happening. If you look at the Kudumbashree model in Kerala, okay, they have tried something very, very I would say radical. They have integrated their women's groups to provide a whole range of services with the Metro Rail Corporation and also with the urban transport system in Trivandrum, in Cochin and other cities. Okay, so there are possibilities, there are existing models that one can look at of how we are able to engage people who are otherwise marginalized in the urban transport systems. So this is where perhaps I would like to stop. There are these stories of change which I will leave all of you to take a look at. We can share this presentation. But more than that, if there are any questions, please feel free to post.
So thank you so much, Rakesh, for the session, and I think it was the most lively and kind of colorful of all the sessions that we have had in the day. Um, of course, we've also had a comment from one of the participants that the webinar is pretty long, but it's interesting. So thank you for that comment. So are there some specific questions related to this section, gender inclusion, social gender equity and social inclusion? If there are certain questions, please feel free to drop it on the chat platform. Due to the time constraints, we will not be able to take these questions maybe immediately. But of course, we will get back to you with the responses on the questions that you submit. So, Rakesh, is there anything else that you would like to kind of mention as a closing remark? Otherwise, we will move to the closing of the session for the day today.
No, not really. I mean, I can just say thank you for having this presentation, and I know that this is something which is, I mean, the idea of gender and social inclusion is quite alien to a lot of sectors, and it is only now, so we are in that nascent stage where we are able to even think of, so inclusivity is not in the lexicon of a lot of technological, intervention. So we feel that public transport to a lot of people is either a technological intervention where you have to constantly improve on technology, which is definitely, required, no denying that. But at the same time, there is a lot of social engineering. So apart from your mechanical engineering and excelling in mechanical engineering, I think there is a lot of scope and also sort of a pressing need to work on social engineering, to really be sensitive to the needs of different kinds of people. And these are not people only outside there. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good question. That's a very, very good question.
Would you like to take it, Rakesh?
Yeah. So why there isn't a woman entrepreneur in the EV industry? What would make them to encourage entering EV industry as entrepreneur? Let me make a different comment here. I'm very, very thankful for you to make this very honest question. If you see, there was a very nice article which was actually trying to analyze the whole startup ecosystem, and we saw that they gave a lot of data saying that a lot of these startup initiatives are led by and conceived by men, young men. Okay, and one of the reasons, so is it happening by default, or there is some design issue and people actually sort of try to delve deeper, and we felt that historically and also culturally, because men have always been trained, or they have been brought up in a manner that they're able to take risks, they are more mobile, they can imagine themselves traveling mobile, moving around, going to different cities without any kind of assistance, which is not the case with women even in the upper caste or upper echelons. And that's the reason why you say that, and there is a lot of confidence when investors also come on board. They have more confidence perhaps in men leading startup initiatives than women. And this is a very pertinent question. So there is no answer, but just another sort of reflection, and which is backed by maybe some of these studies, that if you can go back and take a look at some of the startup initiatives that we read about. Times definitely had a feature every day, or I think every week they used to have a feature of the startup ecosystem, and we saw most of those features would have men. Okay, very seldom you saw women entrepreneurs. So that is the question that we need to ask ourselves, and we should welcome more women, and also ponder upon why this. So let us close perhaps with this question than an answer. Yeah? So thank you very much for having me and giving me this opportunity, Green Tea team and everybody here in the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rakesh. I enjoyed your session a lot personally, and I believe the others might have felt the same. And it was wonderful to have you with us for the session today for this very interesting and very challenging topic on gender inclusion. So with that, we draw to an end of the session today. I would like to thank all the participants that have stayed with us so far. I have seen the numbers dwindling over the span of the hours that we have carried out the session. But for those who have had the patience and the perseverance to bear with us for so many hours, a thank you to all of them. Just one last thing before we close the session, we have shared a feedback form with you, a link for the feedback form with you over a chat platform. we are also going to share this feedback form and the instructions for filling the feedback form with all of you over email as well. So please make sure you are filling up the feedback forms for us. If there are any suggestions, comments, please feel free to put it in the feedback form. And also, as promised in the beginning of the presentation, we will also be circulating participation certificates for all of you who have been a part of this wonderful session today. So, so we have an upcoming session on Monday, which is also again planned for students from different education institutions in Andhra Pradesh, specifically Kakinada. And then there's another session which is planned for next Saturday. So on that note, I would like to close this session from all of us on behalf of UK Pact, Greentree Global, RTI, and UMTC. A very big thank you to all those who have joined us today.
Thank you, everyone.